Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices.
Living life every day.
Hello, and thanks for joining Janine and I today for another episode of our Vigilant Voices podcast.
And we love chatting with you, listener, because we know that you, like us, want to know more about the challenges facing children and families in order to make sure no child faces continued abuse, neglect, or trauma.
Right. And while we have to talk about these challenges, we are trying to shift our focus to ways to improve the children's lives and solutions versus hanging out in the darkness.
Yes. And, there is enough talk of all of the, concerns, the scary, the bad in the world. So let's focus on the good.
Yeah.
And at CASA, we have set a positive vision to work towards, and that's our vision that we want every child to live in a safe and stable home.
Yeah, and we talked about that a lot in our last episode because having a safe space to call home is one of the 4 building blocks for hope.
Right. And listener, I guess this would be a moment to say that this episode would be catching us in the middle of that 4-part series on the science of hope. So if you haven't already, you might want to go back and listen to our discussions on building block 1, which is creating positive relationships.
Yes.
And then the second building block, which is creating safe spaces to live, learn, and play.
Yes. And then today we're going to kind of build on this conversation and talk about the third building block for hope, which is social and civic engagement.
And I think this is how we would say it very simply is helping children feel like they belong.
Yeah,
Right.
Which leads right into the story I wanted to share today, the story of Jay, who didn't feel like he belonged. When Casa met Jay, he was not attending school.
Okay.
He should have been enrolled in high school. And he was having behavioral issues at home, which wasn't really a surprise because once some investigating was done, it was determined that his mother was 100% verbally and physically abusive to Jay.
Yeah, hate to hear that.
For sure. And, Jay had moved around a lot with his family. And in each new county, Child Protective Services would be called and the family would go to court. And at some point, the family would move and the cycle would start again for Jay.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do see this. And without really understanding and sort of digging into history, the people working the case in maybe a new county or jurisdiction just may not know about that family's history.
Right. And, luckily, when a child has a CASA advocate, that advocate is able to invest time in kind of putting these pieces together and creating a full case history. And so in Jay's case, that history showed a really troubling pattern, and the court decided he needed to be removed from his home. And after Jay's advocate spent some time communicating with his grandparents, they decided to let him come stay with them for a little while.
Okay. I obviously have questions on what, quote unquote, a little while means. Because, we want children to have permanence.
Right.
But I know you're going to circle back to this, at the end of the episode. And I'm going to believe that maybe a little while can turn into a long while. And that maybe, Jay can gain a sense of belonging with his grandparents, right? But, children can't really build hope if they just don't even feel like they belong in the first place.
Yeah. Another way to maybe look at this is to say that when kids know they're part of something bigger, whether that be a team or a club, a faith group, a community, they feel valued and connected.
Yeah, and that's so important for all kids. But really, really especially important for children who've experienced trauma of some kind.
Yeah.
Because these kids just really do feel disconnected from peers and community.
It's so true. There's a sense of isolation when you've been living with abuse and neglect. In our work at CASA, we often see children and teens who really do have low confidence levels. And sometimes they have limited exposure to people and groups who could, sew into them or help them succeed.
Yes. And, so we turn to engagement as a building block for hope because social engagement helps children see their strengths, right? Hopefully meet and see supportive adults.
Yeah.
And then form new, potentially new but positive identities outside of the home.
Right. I like how you just said that. Positive identities outside the home.
Right.
because inside the home, they may not be feeling so positive.
Exactly.
Yeah. And our CASA advocates get to know children really well, and they're focused on the children's safety. And so a lot of what the advocates do and recommend has to do with the first two building blocks we talked about in previous episodes, safe relationships and safe homes, right? Like those things are foundational.
That's right. But once that safety and stability is established, our advocates start to look for other ways, right, to build hope. And as our CASA advocates get to know the children they're working with, many times they encourage opportunities for the child to engage with others in a way that will build their sense of worth and belonging.
Yeah, and at a recent training, we actually asked our advocates to brainstorm ways to encourage social and civic engagement, knowing how important it is for building a sense of hope.
Yeah.
And, a few of their top ideas were to first identify a child's interest, right, which makes sense.
Sure.
And then ask if there are school clubs related to those interests. They also suggested exploring programs like sports or choir, theater, dance, just outlets for social engagement.
Yeah, love that. And, they also had some ideas that were specific to civic engagement, and that was maybe scouting groups or ROTC or just community volunteer opportunities, kind of getting just involved.
Sure. And as we're listing all of these ideas, cost is coming to mind as something that could be, a potential barrier. And so that's just something we should always keep in mind when we're suggesting things to children and families.
For sure. But the good news is that we have certainly learned and know that there are a lot of low or no cost activities and programs out there.
That's true.
Researching organizations like the YMCA, the YWCA, local library programs, community centers. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget the outdoors, right? Like fishing, hiking, nature programs. All of those build confidence and teamwork and should be little to no cost.
Yeah. I agree. And there really is so much to do if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe we can go back and learn a little bit more about Jay. So what is his hope outlook looking like?
Yeah. So Jay had a real turnaround while living with his grandparents. Their home offered a sense of calm that he needed. And in their home, they really encouraged civic engagement. They themselves, the grandparents, were involved with their church and volunteering. And so as Jay settled in with them, he became involved in the same things. And boy, did it give him a sense of purpose and change his whole outlook on life. What began as a single summer with his grandparents turned into his forever home.
Oh,
You'll be happy to know.
Okay.
And, it really generated what has become a long-term interest in serving the community.
Love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So listener, remember that any and all positive group experiences reinforce these messages to a child. You belong. You have strengths. You matter to this community.
Yeah. And, these messages help build social skills, gain a sense of purpose, of confidence, right?
Yeah.
And I think really help these children and all children envision a more hopeful future.
Yeah. And so your call to action today is to find a new way to engage with your child. We encourage you to visit the CF Engage website, which is housed by our friends at the Community Foundation for a Greater Richmond.
Yeah, and we'll link to their site in our show notes. And, once you're there, there's also opportunities to search for volunteer opportunities specific to your child's interest and age group, actually.
Yeah. And some of the opportunities are events or activities you go to, and others you could gather up a group to kind of do on your own. So there's just so many options.
Yeah, so this is a great opportunity to hop online and just pick an opportunity that speaks to you or what you think, the children in your life might enjoy.
Yeah, and all the while, remember that civic and social engagement build hope.
And so that puts us with one more building block to talk about, Kristen. And so join us next time to learn what that is.
We hope to see you then. Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.